All right, everybody, welcome to a very, very special episode of the Radiator Arms. And today's is dedicated to the Japanese automobile. More than that, it is also the first episode we're going to do where I'm dedicating it to a person. A couple of days ago, I received some fairly shocking news that the car community lost one of its nicest, friendliest, and loveliest people, a young chap by the name of Jamie Bishop, who will be known to Instagram people as 2J Supra. I got to meet him, I think now about 8 years ago, and he was one of the very first people to trust me with driving their car for a review. He brought me his Mark IV Supra, and later I also drive his Integra DC5. I got the news through another friend in the car community the other day. I have absolutely no idea what happened, what went on, but I know that everybody that met him knew him as just the nicest, warmest, friendliest chap. And I was talking to him only a couple of weeks ago about the potential of him coming to one of our social events, which unfortunately he couldn't make. So I just wanted to say that because I've been thinking about him quite a bit recently, because I'm particularly appreciative to him and all the other people that supported me in the early days when, you know, there was certainly no fame or glory in it for them, and they took a big risk to try and help me achieve what I have. So Jamie, thank you very much. Gentlemen, Japanese cars. Now, in a lot of ways, I think they're maybe more divisive than anything we have in Europe because, well, the Americans don't really get French cars. I found this out recently. I don't think a French car has been sold new in America for decades. German cars, they see in the same way that we do. You know, some people love them, some people hate them. And of course, we don't really get American cars on a day-to-day basis. Even companies like Ford, well, much of the stuff we buy here is actually a product of Ford Europe, as opposed to Ford of the United States or Ford of America. But Japanese cars, we get those. The Americans get them. The Japanese, the sneaky devils, keep some of the really good stuff for themselves, which of course is a true JDM car. But I got to thinking, and I know you've had a Japanese car. I've had Japanese cars. But have you, Will?
Yes, I had a Unis Roadster. It was a 1994 L423 RJN for those playing along at home.
Ooh.
And this was in about 2011. I bought it with an old girlfriend of mine. We bought it as a project car. And we both had fun doing it up. We took it to the Jap Fest show and JAE and a couple of other places like that. And we had some good fun with it. In the end, after we parted ways, we were kind of still friendly enough. And I bought the car off her in about 2015, and I enjoyed that for a year. And that was the car I had before I got my BMW 5 Series, my E39. And I tell you what, that was a good laugh, because this was back when first generation MX-5s hadn't quite started totally falling to pieces with rot, hadn't been smashed into every curb by want-to-be drifters, and haven't also been kind of had their popularity and prices artificially raised by every YouTuber that existed under the sun, as we all know. And it was a different time. That car, I think, was only £300 or £400 then. It was an MOT failure, but we'd actually taken it to an MOT before we agreed to buy it. The guy let us do that because we knew him. He was a friend of the family. And it didn't need much. So we set about kind of restoring this MX-5, but we had it in a really fun way because they weren't really valuable then. So we actually rattle can painted in matte graffiti paint into a kind of a Cadbury's purple kind of thing, which is quite nice because the paint was shot. It was like this red paint. It was original shot. We put a new roof on it, and because we were young at the time, we decided that we would put hideously wide stretched wheels on it and lower it down as low as it could go, to the point where we were driving up north, and honestly, it was the entire way there. But it was the thing we did at the time, and it was cool. And I even got my first experience of going sideways in that thing. It wasn't intentional, but that's how I got it. And that was it was a good car. And I do miss it terribly. Wish I'd hold on to it, because I only got like 250, 300 quid when I sold it, because I got my BMW and I just needed it out of the way. My dad was saying, get rid of that bloody car, because it was littering the car park outside here. And I did. And then that got sold on to a guy who then really went to town on the lowering it and added like spats and body kits and bit. And he was like quite happily posting videos of it getting caught on speed bumps and doing burnouts to get off speed bumps and things like that. It was proper slammed car, like static scene. You all know the static scene, don't you? Mm-hmm. It's all that one of the things where it's a badge of honor to get caught scraping on a leaf. So that's what he did. And then it came back, believe it or not. One day, I couldn't believe this. I just walked out the door of my house and I saw this recovery truck with a cargo by, and I was like, that looks like my old car, which was really confusing because it was sold to a guy 4 hours up north. And the guy sold it to somebody in this general vicinity. And it stayed around here for a little bit. It then got painted what I call Haggard Garage mint green. And then, it stayed around for a little bit. It got past hands, and eventually it died a death, and I was sad to see it, but I didn't intervene and try and buy it because the underneath of it was so smashed up, and at that point so rotten, when it was a rot-free car, just because they'd obviously been out in salt. I mean, I saw a photo of the guy who bought it locally, drifting it out in the salt and the snow. So I'm not surprised. And of course, as you know, the Japanese cars, they have no real underbody protection.
No, it's not something they can worry about.
That was my first one. And my second one, I suppose, does it really count? Because it was basically a Ford Fiesta, was my Mazda 2.
Where was it built?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it was a Japanese one, but they share. So let's put it like this. When I went to get parts for it, I would go and order the Ford equivalent because it was half the price and it would fit.
Sorry, what car?
Mazda 2.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
So it was
Ford and Mazda were...
they're very much in bed, like the Fiesta and the Mazda 121. The Mazda 121 was like badge engineering at its finest, wasn't it? It was literally like Ford parts everywhere, Mazda badge. You could turn your Fiesta into a Mazda 121, probably with half a day at a scrapyard and about 30 quid's worth of stick-on parts.
And this is how Mazda bits wound up in Aston Martins.
Yes, it was, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. What was the famous, you'll remember this because you are a brain of knowledge and everything automotive. What was the cars that ended up with Ford and Mazda bits?
DB7 is the major culprit. And I seem to recall a conversation with a chap where he said that he had a DB7 and one of the door handles broke or failed to operate. He then took it to his dealer. They investigated the problem and said, it's failed, and it's a Mazda part. And he thought, this is a bit odd. First off, he was annoyed that his Aston Martin, which was quite an expensive car in its time, had Mazda parts on it. But he said the greatest frustration was that the door handles are sided. Only Aston Martin just bought one side of door handle and used it on both sides of the car. So evidently the mechanism wasn't working in quite the way it was meant to. Yeah. And so over time, it was always going to break. Oh. And that's one of the reasons that he sold his DB7, but held on to his Vanquish. It was, in fact, a car that I got to drive a couple of years ago. He's had his Vanquish from new. Oh, wow. Which is not something you get to see all that often. And I gotta say, right, it's not Japanese at all, but the original Aston Martin Vanquish is a car that every time I see gets a little bit better looking. They're awesome. But if you want a struggle to maintain, that is it. Every time I go to an Aston specialist and I say, I'm thinking about, they go, nope. No. Hold thy tongue. Don't even do it, because there are so many bits where if it breaks, the car will not work and we cannot get the bit. There are ECUs that are sort of Ford bits, only Aston put stuff on the board, so it's now bespoke. And there's one, to give you an example, when the car turns on, one of the things it does is it basically checks the intake flap is operational, so just basically cycles it, opens and closes it.
The throttle body,
that's the one. And the ECU that controls that packs up. Now, if the ECU tells the car that the throttle body is not correctly operational, the car will not start. Now, the throttle body is actually absolutely fine, and if the car started, it would actually work absolutely dandy. But as the self-check can't report that it is operational, it won't start. And because it's a completely bespoke piece of hardware, that's kind of difficult to replicate. It's not like you could just go and get a Mondeo ECU off the shelf and reprogram it. No, there's hardware on there as well.
Has nobody been able to kind of reconfigure the ECU and rewrite the software to say, yeah, don't worry about that check?
No, because it's a fairly old-fashioned car, you've got quite a few different ECUs, all controlling different things, all of which expect to be able to talk to each other.
Yes.
So it's not like an older car where you could just put on a modern ECU and it will control everything because it's all analog anyway. And it's not like a newer car where you can either get the bits or, again, one brain controls many functions and you can do it. It's just this weird, awkward halfway house. And, of course, they didn't make it in great quantity.
Wasn't this a thing? Was Aston Martin owned by Volvo? Who was owned by Volvo at some point or shared it?
That's Ford. You had the Premier Automotive Group. So they had Volvo, Jaguar, Aston Martin. Was there another company in there? I don't think so. But they did create some cool cars in that period.
Because I remember watching a video online, I think it might have been with Sam Crack. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He buys cars cheap from auctions and like does them up and on like a shoestring. And I think I remember him saying he had to get a new body control module. I think it's for an Aston of some sort. And it was a Volvo part. But he couldn't code it in because it was a Volvo part, even though it was identical or something like that. And he then had to buy an Aston or something ridiculous like that. So I'm not surprised.
Couldn't they use standalone ECU? Or is it just because they're so expensive, it's not economical to do so?
It's not that. I think it is, again, the issue that the standalone doesn't have the functionality required and then it won't talk to the dash. I can't remember the specifics of it, but they were like, yeah, no. You would just think... I think also the problem is they keep using the term ECU, which you think of as just the engine management component. And you're like, it's not. It does more than just that. I mean, like you say, you get these body control ECUs, which basically operate the windows and things. So, yeah, when you go to open the door, if the window doesn't drop, that could be 800 quid.
It's ridiculous. Cars are not like they used to be where, for instance, the Golf, we talk about that. So in that era of where it has got a couple modules, but, even if one of them is not working, the rest of the car will still work. The ECU for the engine doesn't care if the one which controls the central locking and the interior things isn't there. As long as the instrument cluster is there, which sends the CAN bus signals out, it doesn't care. It'll run and it'll work.
Yeah, no, these are cars of a time. It's the same with any Ferrari of that era, and to be honest, even the modern era. You don't just put the key in a Ferrari and turn it. You have to turn the ignition on, wait until the car is happy, then turn it on.
Doesn't the 360 have two ECUs? Or has it got two banks?
Some of them do, yeah. It was actually quite common for a lot of cars of that era. You effectively, the engine is run as 2 4 cylinders. 355 did it. I don't think the 550 does, but yeah, some of those old cars you get in, even Murcielago, I think is like it, because you'll have the warning light on the dash that says check engine 1 to 6 or 7 to 12, and it'll tell you which bank the fault is on. But these are not Japanese cars.
I was just about to say.
Yes. Anyway,
I've had a Japanese car or two.
Yeah, haven't you had more Japanese cars than anything else?
I suppose if you count the Toyota that was a hand-me-down for my dad.
I count it.
Okay, then I think it's 5 because it's the Toyota, the
Which
Nissan
a Corolla liftback.
Toyota Corolla liftback 1977 in metallic. I don't know, sky blue, I don't know what else to call it. I don't remember what the exact colour name was. And then I had the 350Z quite some years later. And then my first 370Z, which I bought brand new. Then I got the 370Z Nismo and, little known fact, a Mazda RX8.
Yep. Which I have been tooling around in recently and really quite enjoying. And it's one of these cars that I think could only ever have come from Japan, because there's so much about it where you think anybody else would look at this and go, lads, what are you doing? It's not a particularly light car. Surprised me, actually, because with it having a rotary, part of the appeal of a rotary is it's a very compact and lightweight engine. I mean, you can lift a rotary engine up. but the car is still near 1,400 kilos, which for something like that is not especially lightweight. It's got a reasonable amount of power. It's 232 horsepower, I think, in that one. Not a lot of torque at all, 159 pounds-feet. That's 216 newton meters. And of course, it revs to the moon.
That's one of the best things about it.
It is. And so if you try and put your foot down at like 2,000 or 3,000 RPM, not much is really going to happen. But if you just let your instincts take over, don't look at the rev counter, don't pay any attention to that, just feel it, just do what feels right. You use the gearbox, which is just one of the best gearboxes ever made. Coincidentally, basically the same gearbox that's in an S2000. And I think, funnily enough, neither company make the gearbox. It's in fact made by Toyota. I don't know what Toyotas it goes in. It must go in something. But yeah, you just use that engine, and it's not especially quick, but it handles so well. The seating position is so right. The steering is beautiful. The gearbox is fantastic. And because that engine doesn't have masses and masses and masses of power, you work it really hard, and you just find yourself having the best time in it ever. It's just so much fun, this thing. And it really reminds you that you don't need big numbers to enjoy a car. In fact, if anything, I find sometimes big numbers are a hindrance to the enjoyment of a car. And I think one of the things that marks out Japanese cars as being quite unique is that they, I think, perhaps rivaled only, I would say, by American cars, as they are a representation of culture. And that means a lot of different things. You also find that they're, of course, a representation of the rules of that culture, by which I mean not sort of, unspoken, honor between people type thing. Or what I mean is like the actual rules laid down by the government. And of course, as ever, it is restriction that breeds innovation. It's the same, I think, as to why Italians wound up going down the route of, low, small displacement cars, but high revving, because they had this tax on 2-litre cars or over 2 litres, which is why Ferrari, fun fact for you, did at various points in time make special Italian market versions of their cars. So we know the 308, but you might not know the 208, which is a 2-litre turbo Ferrari made for the Italian market.
Oh.
And in Japan, it's the same thing. I can't recall whether it was on displacement or on something else, but you then get these small, high-revving engines, which then wound up being stuff like the famous Honda VTEC. And you also have the turbocharged cars of the sort of particularly, I think, 1990s is the era that many of us remember. And the 1990s, I think, is a golden period for Japanese cars. Their economy was doing really, really well at the time. Here in Britain, I don't know whether you remember this so much or not, Will, but you had a big grey market scene here.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah.
Jeros and things like that. They were always coming over as grey market cars, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. Basically, they were quite reasonably priced in their home market, and the exchange rate meant that you could bring one over for less than the price any dealer could sell it here.
It's how my MX-5 came over. Same thing. It was part of that grey market scene.
Yeah, it unfortunately was the downfall of a lot of motorcycle dealerships here. I know at least one guy that lost his dealership because you're trying to sell a bike for, let's just call it 10 grand. Well, someone could go and buy that bike from Japan for 7, and all they've got to do is put a sticker on the Speedo that then converts it to MPH, and they can ride it. Like, you can't compete with that. But the cars coming over were fantastic. And we in Britain, maybe as the topic for another episode, I genuinely believe that Britain has to be one of the best places in the world to be a car enthusiast, because not only do we have a selection of fantastic roads, both down here in England, but also in the likes of Wales, Scotland, and often underappreciated Ireland, both bits, before I get us into trouble. I did a tour a few years ago actually, going around the coastal causeway route in both Northern Ireland and then sort of down into the Republic. And it's spectacular and also empty. We must do it at some point. Of course, you've got the Isle of Man as well. I've never done the Isle of Man, got to do that. I want to do the TD, but I also want to just go and drive the place. But we're also allowed to import all of these things. So provided it meets sort of basic regs, which just about any new car will, we can have anything from anywhere, which I know our friends in the United States will be very, very envious of, although I also blame them for basically ruining the Japanese car scene.
Oh, yeah, massively. I mean, like when the GTR, the R34 got to its sort of 25-year anniversary, I think for about 3 years before that, they just started going up and up and up and up. And then eventually they were just like insane, like 1.6 million for I think V-Spec 2 or something like that.
That was quite an exceptional. That was you can go and buy like a V-Spec 2 for like 240 grand or something, or 200 grand. But if you want just a plain old R35 GTR, it's still what, 150 grand?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to talk about the 25-year rule, because you could bring some cars over on limited show and display, I think it was, for some of them. And there was also, I think there was a weird loophole. Was it Canada that had it? It was 15 years you could bring them in.
Correct.
Yeah.
And some people were bringing them into Canada and then kind of title washing and registering them over in the States and hoping someone would get caught. I know there's a thing of people registering S15s as S13s and stuff like that, and doing all kind of dodgy things to get them in. But you guys may be aware of this. I'm pretty sure it was R34. There were some actual ones which ended up kind of federal kind of legally imported through a loophole or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was based on the fact that if they could show that it had no more than a certain percentage difference from another car, can't remember which one it was. I can't remember if it was because I think a previous version had been homologated for the US. Was it the 33?
It's either 33. I think 32s might have had, or was it the 240? Because they had the 240, which was the S13. They did have American spec ones, didn't they?
Yeah, I didn't think they got any of the GTRs until the R35.
Yeah,
But there was a company, I can't remember the name of them now. I'll look it up in a minute when you're talking, who imported them, and then they had to make some modifications to it to make it more like, I think, some other car that had been homologated. It might have been the 33. I'm not sure. I'll check. And then because it was close enough, they were then able to register them, and they ended up being kind of grandfathered in, so to speak. I think there was a bit of a controversy around it. But while you guys are nattering, I'm going to quickly look it up.
Yeah. Didn't they also have some of the actual Fast and Furious cars wound up being registered or something like that? I seem to recall something like that.
I think Paul Walker did his best to get some of the registered, because he had like 34s in the States like way before they were supposed to be. And I don't know if that's because they were film cars or what it was, but...
Yeah, well, there are ways to get them over there. I recall being over in the States this would be about 7 or 8 years ago now, and there was a dealer that had 2 or 3 R34 GTRs in there. And at the time, they must have been about 20 years old or, something around that. I looked at them, I said, hang on a minute, you're not allowed those, are you? And they said, well, as a dealer, yeah, we are. I suppose in the same way that there is nothing stopping you owning a Cybertruck here. It's just if you want to use it on the road, that's when it becomes complicated. And I believe they said that over there, they could drive it around with their equivalent of a dealer plate on it. And they could, of course, have sold it to, I think, a collector potentially. But yeah, you couldn't guarantee that you could just go drive the car and use it on the road.
I think what was happening with a lot of those is some of them might have been brought in and then finally registered when it hit 25 years or something like that. Because I know there was people on YouTube, I saw it, American guys who had come over to the UK, bought examples of them, and then stashed them away like at a friend's house somewhere safe before the price. Because obviously, as it got closer to the 25 years, the price of those cars started going up and up and up and up.
The R34 GTR T-Spec that I drove belonged to a good friend of mine, George. That was bought by a chap who was going to take it to the States, and it got sold about 18 months before its 25th birthday. And pretty much that happened, where it was then stuck in a warehouse here to wait until it got to the required age before it was then shipped over. You know the really annoying things about R34 GTRs?
They're not that good?
No, they're brilliant.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I recall the first time that I drove one, I was really, really hopeful that it was going to be actually a bit of a don't meet your heroes moment because, you know, when you think of it, right, you're like, look, I know it's acquired this legendary status and everything else, but also part of the status it's acquired is because you could tune it, you could do things to it, you could get it to make incredible power because back in the day, it wasn't normal for performance cars to be turbocharged. You know, it was the lesser trodden route. But I drove this thing and it was absolutely magnificent. So interactive, so exciting. The engine's got to be one of the best I've ever experienced. The gearbox was brilliant. The steering was brilliant. And every second I was turning the air blue, thinking, why didn't I buy one of these? And then I remembered why I didn't buy one of them back in the day. And look, I try not to regret the fact that I didn't get one when they were 70 odd grand. And actually, they're even less than that for a standard one. But I look at them now and I go, I could have one if I wanted, but I would probably have to sell either the F12 or the Scuderia to do it. And I'm not doing that. I'm just not.
You've got to absolutely love the car to be able to do that, or have more money than you know what to do with. I've got an answer. So it was a company called Moto X, and what they did is they crash tested an R33, submitted the paperwork and certification to the EPA, and then they started modifying others to meet the US approval. Then they ran into some legal trouble after they started importing 32s and 34s, but telling them they were 33s. And I think what they did is they did modify them in order to make them, this is what I recall, it's not in this article, they did modify them to have more in common with the other, with the 33 that they'd crashed. But basically it was a loophole that they thought they were trying to exploit but didn't really exist. So something along those lines. But that's what happened. And that was, I don't know when that was, but it was
Some time ago,
yeah. I think it was in the early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think Doug DeMuro famously did a video on one of those ones which loophole cars from the Moto X place that's actually registered, and that got quite a lot of views back in the day. So my quick question to you is, so it is a two-part one. What are 34s worth in the UK now, and also are they worth it?
I don't think I just don't think they're worth the amount of money that people are talking about. Like things like the GTT, they're reasonable money, but the GTRs I think have just gone bonkers. It's like I don't think I've seen one for less than 150 for quite some time. Wow. And you know, when you're talking about cars that go up to like 1.5 million or 250,000 for like some of the not even that special editions.
Are you thinking of the 400R?
400R was the 1.6 million. That's
yeah,
it.
That was at Harlow Japanese Autos, wasn't it?
That's the one.
I just don't think they're worth it, which is not the same as saying they're not good cars, because as just discussed, they are utterly and totally sensational. But I have I'm not sure if it's a theory or a belief. Whenever any car gets to the point, and this happens for many classic cars because it's just a function of time, whenever any car gets to the point where secondhand, decades down the road, it is now commanding either the same or more than its original new price, it has to be something genuinely special. It has to be a truly remarkable car in some way, shape, or form. But the unfortunate thing that has happened with a lot of these Japanese cars now, particularly your really rare examples of stuff, is that you can now no longer look at them as a car and ask if they are worth the money. Instead, you are looking at these things as an investment.
Yeah.
And this saddens me greatly. A McLaren F1 is not a 20 million quid car. It's just not. I am sure it is probably brilliant and amazing, and I am sure I will never get the chance to find out. I've never even managed to sit in one. I've seen a few of them in the flesh. That's it. But it's just not. And you speak to people that remember these cars when they weren't worth very much money, and that tells you everything you need to know. I spoke to a chap not too long ago who went on a track day way back when track days weren't really a thing. And this is in the late 90s. And there were a bunch of different cars there, all owned by the same guy, including a McLaren F1. And he said, nobody was driving the F1 because, yeah, it's very good. It's certainly very, very fast. I mean, physics tells you that, 600 odd horsepower in an 1,100 kilo car is going to be quick. But I said, they didn't think it was maybe the best handling thing ever. The brakes were rubbish. And there were other cars that they just felt were more exciting and more interesting. Of course, the McLaren F1 has gone on to acquire a reputation. Look at the Pagani Zonda. Now, Harry Metcalf did a really good video talking about why it was that he sold his Zonda. And the fact is that when he had the car, it was worth, I think, maybe about £300,000. The same car now would be worth over 2 million quid. Of course, with hindsight, yes, he'd love to have kept it. But the fact is, he had the car, he enjoyed it, he used it, he wanted to get a new exhaust for it, and Pagani wanted 100 grand. These cars also become almost impossible to use. I recall an article, and this is from probably about 15 or 16 years ago, right? The insurance for a McLaren F1 was about 15 grand a year.
Wow.
And that was with limited mileage of about 2,000 or 3,000 miles. When Rowan Atkinson crashed his, the quote for the repair was £80,000. Now, I'm going to say that again slowly for those at the back. The quote for the repair, i.e., the process of working out how much the repair was actually going to cost, was £80,000.
Wow.
You see, now, when I first heard what you were just saying, what I heard was it was going to cost 80 grand to fix. But no. It was going to cost 80 grand for them to just look at the car and then tell you how much it was really going to cost you to fix.
Because it's so complicated and so difficult to take apart. It's £80,000 worth of labour just to work out how broken actually is it. You cannot swap the parts from one F1 to another because they're all handmade. You can't take a door off an F1 and put it on another. It won't fit.
There's a fun fact about McLaren F1s as tech nerds, so you probably already know this, is that their diagnostics can only be done, or at least it certainly was true when I remember reading this, on an old specific, it might have been a Toshiba laptop of some sort, with MS-DOS and a certain thing, or Windows 3.1, like so. Those laptops in the tech scene actually went up in value tremendously and were being bought by either collectors or people, so they could say, I've got the laptop which works and is certified for the McLaren F1.
No, that's very, very much true because the car, again, a technical tour de force in its day, had a modem in it.
Oh, I remember that, yeah. You could run a telephone line and plug it in.
Yeah, and it talked back to base. I mean, what information it would have given them, I don't know, because it would have been very, very basic. I mean, this is pre-OBD2.
Yeah.
So
it would have been like, I'm broken, I'm not broken.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Formula One teams that are running heritage cars also have a similar issue. I recall reading an article, I think talking about the Williams cars. Formula One technology is very, very closely guarded. Even long after it was current tech, people still don't talk about it. I know your friend Dan Ant has obviously had this struggle with getting his own car back on the road. And even if you take the money bit out of the equation, it's an incredibly detailed, in-depth and long process to get one of these cars to the point where you can use it. The engines in particular, I'm not actually sure if some of the teams ever owned their engines. I think they were effectively leased, basically.
Yep.
So Williams managed to get some of their original Renault engines back. And Renault handed the engine over, and of course, it has its own specific software and things to run it, which also means its own specific hardware to talk to that software. And when they plugged it in, the guy finally got it working, turned it on, and he's like, it's in French. So basically, the guys at Williams said, cool, so your job for the next few weeks is learning French engine terminology.
Brilliant.
Fun fact, we have had the engine on the dyno twice now.
Yep.
And exactly that challenge, just getting the computer to tell you everything and talk to you and control everything in the right way, although they were able to find a particular issue. So watch this space. On Sportzntouring, we might be getting a dyno run of a V10 F1 engine, a Cosworth one, not a Honda one, but hey, close enough.
Yeah.
But back to Japanese cars, if that's okay.
Oh, yes.
Or at least the topic, closer back to the topic again. The issue being about insuring them. Like, for example, if someone maybe inherited a very special GTR from their parents for when it was at a sensible price, many of them might not be able to afford to keep them now. A friend of mine, it wasn't a Japanese car, it was a Mustang. But a friend of mine, his father-in-law passed away and bequeathed I can't remember what year it was, late 60s Mustang of some description, but it was a very, very special one. And for the first few years, it was fine. They were able to look after the car. They would sort of take it out just for short runs, just to keep it moving. But they looked after it as an investment because it was already worth a lot of money. And every year they had it appraised for insurance purposes. It just kept going up and up and up until eventually they just couldn't afford the insurance anymore. Even though it was locked in a garage and behind a bollard and had a tracker and had all of this other stuff, they just could not afford. They're sort of middle class income. They just couldn't afford it anymore. In fact, his father-in-law, by that point, had he survived, probably wouldn't have been able to afford the car. And I think that's probably true of many Japanese cars now.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people I know that got their GTRs maybe 15 to 20 years ago, and they got them when they were, in the teens in terms of pricing. You see this similar thing with Subaru 22Bs. Our mutual friend Richard from Challenge the Road, he bought and sold his last 22B, I think, for 25 grand. And the next one he had to pay 150 for it. And I think he got offered 300 for that car.
Wow.
So on the one hand, the prices going up means that these cars will stay around because they're worth enough money that if they require work and they require restoration, it'll be done. The downside is that people then won't use these cars. I saw the same thing happen with stuff like old Aston Martins. So I know a few people that bought, say, a DB5, DB4, DB6 in the 90s when they were worth, tens of thousands of pounds. Well, the car that maybe they bought for, let's call it 50 grand, and they spent 50 grand on because they are very maintenance intensive cars. Well, at one point that was worth 50 grand. Then it got to be worth 100 grand. They were very happy because it meant now it didn't really, owe them any money. Then it got to be worth 200 grand. They thought, this is lovely. If I sell this car, I'd have made 100 grand. But they didn't want to sell it because they loved the car. Then it got to the point where it's worth 400 grand. At which point you start going, well, look, I'll use and drive a 100 or 150 grand car, but a 400,000 pound car. Now that's a different matter. And especially if you're not of unlimited means, you start thinking, well, hang on a minute, you've got something here that's worth nearly £500,000. That's a very, very nice house, or that's a mortgage on your house paid off, and you can go and buy another car. And so a lot of my friends have used this opportunity to go, do you know what? We've had our Japanese cars, we've had our fun, we've enjoyed it. And in all honesty, if, let's just say, 15 years ago, someone had walked up to you with a Ferrari 458, right, and said, I'll swap my 458 for your R34, you'd have bitten their hand off. Because at the time, they'd have been giving you a car that cost 2 or 3 times as much as yours was worth. Well, now, the Nissan's worth more than the Ferrari. And it's that old joke, isn't it? What's the retail on one of those, pal?
More than you can afford.
Nissan.
Yeah. Although, I mean, that was a meme going around for a while, wasn't it? When the Supra started costing more than the 355 itself that was in the video. Was it 355, 348?
It is the 355.
355, that was it.
355
yeah, no.
It's a Spider.
Was
I'm sure it's a Spider.
No, it was the Targa, wasn't
Was it Targa? Okay. We'll have to look that up later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Supra, funnily enough, I last drove a Supra, Mark IV Supra, we're talking about here.
Yeah.
About 2 or 3 years ago, maybe, and it was a naturally aspirated one. I think it might have been on throttle bodies or something like that. It was quite modified, but still naturally aspirated and manual. So that's the other thing I think with the Japanese car scene, and this has always been the way, is that you always remember the car, but when you start to look into it, you realize that actually you remember or you think of one very specific version. Like you said it earlier, you talk about a Skyline and you instantly think GTR. Whereas actually there was like the GTS-Ts and various different iterations, which actually I've never driven. I've never driven like a GTS-T or a GTT or whatever they are. And they're probably quite good. But, you know, if someone out there's got one and wants me to drive it, I'll have a go.
They're all rear-wheel drive ones, aren't they?
Correct.
And did they all come with the, well, they RB25s, RB26s, twin-turbo, single-turbos, those ones?
Pass.
Don't remember.
Fair enough.
This is when you need a Domani Marcano.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you have a Domani Marcano, he'll tell you all the letters and the numbers and subversions and serial numbers of everything. You know,
He'll be listening to this right now screaming.
Yeah.
Just screaming at the speakers.
That's fine. But you also find that the car you maybe wanted didn't exist, or the car you can afford is actually, you're like, well, what I really want is a twin turbo manual Supra. And you then find out that you can't afford that because that's the one that everybody wants. So that's the one that wound up being worth a lot of money. So you can either then go and buy a twin turbo auto Supra, which is what Jamie had and I drove, silver one. And apparently that's what the drag racing guys in the States really like, because they like their auto boxes, you know, nice, repeatable, dependable, and you aren't going to destroy the clutch on a launch. Or you can go and get a naturally aspirated manual one and then try and twin turbo it, which is quite a bit of effort.
This is an interesting one. I remember there was a guy about 10 years ago, probably a few people done it since, but I think it was Absolute Modix or Bloody's Garage or something. Was that? I don't know if you ever saw it.
Bloody, yeah, I remember him, yeah.
Yeah. And he had an NA Supra Auto, and I think he manual converted it and then turbo converted it on the NA block as well. I swear he did a series of something similar like that.
It's a big job. It's not just a case of just taking the NA engine and sticking your turbo on the side of it. Like, there's a lot of work involved if you want to do it properly.
It took a while for him to do it, but he did. I remember the series. It was a good series. Did a really good job on it as well. So
I remember watching that as a blast from the past. But that has always been part of the issue, is that you always remember this one particular version of a car, and then you find out that actually, no, there are lots and lots of others out there. But what I also loved about Japanese cars is this very thing of, it is an inherent part of the scene that if there's a car out there and it's kind of like the one that you want, but you can't afford the one that you want, then you go and buy the quote-unquote lesser car and you make it into the thing that you want it to, you know, be it a 350Z or an S13 or, a Skyline of some description or an MX-5 or whatever. Like, you cannot talk about the Japanese car scene without talking about modification. See, here in Britain, as a general rule, we're sort of anti-modding. Like, you go to the States and they will mod anything. Okay, they will mod R8s, they will mod M5s and M3s. Yeah, I know you two. Right? Okay, yeah. But there are a lot of cars here where people would not modify Ferraris here. Like, maybe they put an exhaust on it. Like, that's about it. The Americans will not stop. There is nothing they will not modify. Now, it's not that we don't have that here, but we don't have it to anywhere near the same extent.
Yeah, I don't want to put a Liberty Walk kit on a 355.
No.
I would.
Of course you would.
But, you know, there's... I think that's true. But I think it does depend a lot on the value of the car. And I think it's kind of like the more expensive the car, the more people are thinking about selling it.
Yes.
And, you know, modifying a car is money that you spend on it that not only do you not get back, you will often devalue the car.
Yeah.
So it'll be worth less with the mods than in its original form. So I think that is part of the concern, that people are worried much more about how it's going to harm the resale value. I think in America, there's like quite a scene where people will modify the car, but they can still put it back to stock. So if they want to then sell it as an asset, they put it all back to stock. Apart
I
from the
think
tune.
it's just about, it's a cultural difference about being really ludicrously showy.
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. I think in Britain we're generally, I mean, present company accepted, but generally a bit more reserved, shall we say, about things. Whereas
Well, that's the thing. In Britain, if you go and buy, let's say, an Aventador, that's enough. That's already a statement. But if you're in, particularly, say, somewhere like LA, no, it's not enough. It's
No.
not enough. You have to go and put 25-inch rims on it and, a Liberty Walk kit, so it's now 3 feet wider than it used to be.
It's interesting you mention this because we were having a brief discussion the other day. Mark McCann, he's got his P1, hasn't he? And he's wrapped that and he's put different wheels on it.
Ruined that poor car.
Yeah, I mean, at least the thing with that is like, okay, I love modding things. I'm somebody that in my younger years once sticker bombed almost an entire Peugeot 106 because I was an idiot. So I'm not averse to doing silly mods, but as much as I didn't mind the look of the P1 when he was done, I wouldn't do it. I would have preferred it, kind of as it was, and he would do it. But at least the way you got to look at it is what Mark has done. It's all reversible. As long as that when that wrap comes off, it hasn't ruined any of the paint or caused any issues like that. He's kept the original wheels. He can at least put it back to stock and have his fun with it. But the problem is a lot of the cars that happen get modified in America, as you say. The angle grinder comes out, they get cut, they get sliced, and things like that. And that car is like Leepu from like that Chop Shop TV show. Do you remember that?
No.
Oh, there'll be people out there who know exactly what I'm on about. And when we say cut it, chop it, modify it. So
that sounds familiar, that phrase. So maybe I'm unconsciously aware of it.
It was done in a garage in Bethnal Green, I think.
Right.
I'm sure plenty of cars have been chopped up in a garage in Bethnal Green.
Are you sure we're talking about cars?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
100%.
But I see, the thing is, for me, I have this thing about like, why is it that people are so fussy about not modding their cars? It's like
Finance.
people. Okay, yes, okay, that is a really good reason. Finance, yes, for sure. So if you've bought a new car and it's on finance, you're generally not allowed to mod it. We know of at least one YouTuber who got caught out with that, ended up having to buy the car out from the finance when they found out how much he'd modified it, because you're just not supposed to do it. I mean, people don't read the...
It is in the terms and conditions.
Yeah, but people don't read that, they just sign it. One of the reasons I wanted the 370Z is because I could have afforded to buy the Nismo outright. Because I wanted to modify it, I wanted to do what I wanted to do with it. But even when you take that away, there are people, even Ben from Dad Cars, he's very much against modifying cars, keep it stock. But at the same time, like he customizes houses. I mean, that's how he, made his living for quite some time. We'll customize our house, but we won't customize our car. I don't get it.
Well,
it's the second thing you're going to spend most of your time in, right?
but also when you do a house up, I think, like you say, if you were to take a nice, beautiful Georgian property and install an adult fun dungeon in it, then you might find that negatively affects the value of the property. Or maybe people will look at it and people go, well, that's going to go. Like, that's getting bulldozed on day one. But I think, again, 25 years ago, when Will and I were younger and Ant was less old, then the normal thing for young people starting out in their automotive journey was to buy the cheapest car they could afford to buy cash.
Yep.
Which was invariably something a bit naff.
Citroen Saxo.
Yeah, Saxos or an old 205, something like that. And always with a hideous base model engine in it. And then what you did was went and spent lots and lots of money on all the things the car didn't need, like big wheels, silly stickers, a rip speed, CD player, your 6x9s for the parcel shelf, all that sort of stuff.
2 words: max power.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the time.
And it was about basically showing off and making your car your own. But culture changed. I think probably if we look back on it, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the financial crisis where things changed quite dramatically. You also then had the scrappage scheme. So many of these cars were just taken off the road, and that's a great shame. And people then decided that instead what they wanted was, opposed to having this very individual sort of thing with a lot of flair about it, even if it is rough around the edges and possibly an MOT failure waiting to happen, they then said, actually, I'd rather go and buy a Yaris or an Igo for £99 a month and, £99 deposit. And that's kind of what happened. Is we all used to own our phones. And now I've had phones where they want more a month for the finance on a phone than you used to be able to get a car for. I mean, I buy my phones outright now just because that's the way that I work. But, I see now people want 3-year contracts where if you want the latest iPhone or Android equivalent, you can be paying at least 60 or 70 quid for a phone. That's a lot of money.
I mean, it is
doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a computer / camera / film camera / movie studio in your pocket, but
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm going to defend that slightly here. As somebody who is a tech bro, I do like having the more later and the greater phones. This is an iPhone 15 Pro Max, and I use it for a majority of the things I do. You know, it's like every email, photos, even the videos that you've seen on the JayEmm and Friends channel that I've done, they've all been filmed on this because I am not quite ready to use a DSLR properly yet. But this has done so many things for me that I don't mind the fact that I get to trade it in every couple of years and get a later model with the improvements. For me, I'm fine with that. I can understand why a lot of people don't want to upgrade their phones. And for most people, I'd absolutely agree. Keep your phone, replace the battery, keep it as long as possible, and stop these things going into landfills.
And I just want to say that was not an integration, but hey, Apple, if you want to sponsor us, we'd be totally open to the idea.
You'll have to come through me first, though.
We'll just leave him out. Will and I, we're good.
We'll tie him up. He is the most anti-Apple man I think I've ever met, almost.
Yeah. But just because they used to do silly stuff, and that's the topic of a whole other thing.
I agree.
Okay, but Japanese cars, we are starting to lose this a little bit now, but the appeal of them was, and this is across the whole spectrum, they gave you the performance of much more exotic and expensive cars for a lot less. And that, I think, is what made so many of them so appealing. Like the whole point of an Impreza, a Skyline, a Supra, an RX7 was they would keep up with, if not beat, proper European exotics for a fraction of the price.
That's exactly it. And in fact, if you wind it all the way back, I think the car that probably started that more than anything else was probably the 240Z, because that was specifically designed primarily for the American market, I think also for the European market, to be like a cheap Ferrari alternative. It was meant to be a small sports car that was stylish and quick, but not trying to be, a very expensive exotic, but at the same time trying to appeal to the people that would love to have, I don't know, some front engine Ferrari that I don't know the name of, but instead we'll have the Toyota, the Nissan, because that's what they can afford.
I've got a good little story about you. I didn't tell you about how I pretty much grew up looking at, I think it was a green FB RX7 pretty much every day. My dad shared a unit with another kind of guitar instrument repairer builder, and the guy he worked with had this lovely green A-Reg FB RX7, which I think is actually one of the just most beautiful kind of 80s Japanese cars. I adore them. Very, very rare as well, from what I understand now.
Oh, in Britain, they're virtually gone.
Yeah, completely gone. Except that car, I know for a fact, has been restored, and I've seen it going down the road as well. And I'm going to message the guy. I'm going to see if he's happy to get you in the kind of like the driving seat of that.
Love to. I've not done an FB. I've done the FC and the FD. But not an FB.
And for every time I've seen it, it's immaculate. The car, I know it's sat for a long time, but it went through and it was fully restored. And the guy's son owns it now. And I always used to love that car then, because my dad, that was parked next to my dad's E28 M535i, and I just think, what a time to be alive. Oh. And then it was sat next to his Ford Sierra estate, which even though it wasn't a bit more humdrum, also a great car. So yeah, the FC RX7 would love one of those.
You know, if you get that, just please let Damani know. He will never, ever, ever, ever forget a day where he just got to be around that. He's such a RX fan. He loves them all.
Well, you need to take him then. I talked about this in the review I just did of your RX8. You need to take him to the Deals Gap Rotary Rally. Okay.
Right.
It's an annual event, happens in the United States. I can't recall exactly where Deals Gap is, but it's near a fairly legendary piece of road called the Tail of the Dragon.
Oh, yeah.
Which, in case you've not heard of it, is, I believe, 316 corners across 11 miles, something like that. I actually think it's a hideously overrated piece of road because it's literally just chicane after chicane after chicane after chicane. It just doesn't ever stop. And you see people turning up on Harleys, which is hilarious. You're like, what are you doing here? You want to turn up there. If you're on a bike, you want to be on like a super motard or something like that, or a scooter, to be quite honest. And if you turn up in a car, you do not take a Dodge Challenger there or a Nissan Navara, as I did, what they call the Frontier. You want to be there in something light, nimble and agile, like an Elise or an RX7 or RX8. And yeah, it's fantastic. See, of course, in the States, these cars have survived because, first off, something doing 20 to the gallon is pretty normal for them, and having no power to go with it is also fairly normal. But also in the lower states, you don't tend to have the rust issue, which of course here in Britain is what kills these cars. And because they weren't ever worth that much money, you've bought your Civic Type R for 1,500 quid, and then all of a sudden you're told, by the way, you know it needs like £1,000's worth of welding. You go, oh, sod that then. I'll scrap it. I'll just get rid of it, which is very unfortunate, but that's kind of what happens. You know, a lot of these cars were not built to last. We got underneath your RX8 the other day, and it's actually pretty decent. But a lot of the earlier ones, I mean, an RX8, let's face, that's a modern car, isn't it? That's a car. I mean, okay, it's actually 22 years old now as a model, but you think of an RX8 as a new car, and loads of them are to the point where they are not economically viable.
I see what you did there. My Mazda 2, even when I bought that in 21, that was 2008, and even that still had a bit of crust underneath it. I know it's from the coast, but you know, just the equivalent Fiesta from that period just wouldn't have been as crusty. And I ended up having to do a lot of wire brushing back on that in the end, and actually before I sold it, and you know, getting it back, kind of painting it up and protecting it. And yeah, it's one of those. That is the saddest thing about the entire country basically being the Rust Belt. Yeah. Is that just all the nice stuff is just slowly disintegrating.
But all right, gents, I want to start talking about some actual specific cars that are not GTRs because they've hogged the conversation thus far. I'm just going to throw some stuff out. But Ant, go on.
Before you get into that, you haven't run through your Japanese repertoire.
Oh no, I haven't. I was trying to remember what my first was, and I think it might be the Celica.
Right,
I can't recall that I had a Japanese car before that. My ex-girlfriend had a Civic Type R FN2.
Doesn't count.
Yeah, so there you go. And it doesn't count because it's a Civic or because it's the X's?
Because it's the X's. I love Civics.
Yeah. I think my first Japanese car, may have been the Toyota Celica GT4, the rally icon and legend. And it's just, I mean, I've been seeing that car a lot recently, which is a good thing. And it's just such a good looking thing. On occasion recently, I've had just that and the 550 on the driveway. And you know what? If that was my entire car collection, I'd be a very, very happy man, because they are two very different, but both equally epic cars from the same period in time, and they're just awesome to look at and to drive.
And together, I think they just look so good together.
Yeah, they really, really do. And then, of course, I did have a Toyota Previa for a little bit that I got given for free. I sort of forget about that, but I
don't even know what that is, but I'll look it up later.
Carrier. Actually, it's quite fun because it's actually mid-engined rear-wheel drive.
Huh?
Yeah, because it's built on a basically, I think a pickup. I think it's Hilux platform or something. I can't remember. But effectively, you're sat on top of the engine and it drives the rear wheels, so you can do donuts. It's awesome. And then, of course, there's the S2000. which has also caused me quite a bit of grief and stress. But, I do love absolutely dearly. Also want to say a big shout out to the Japanese car manufacturers for making my life as an automotive journalist easy, because they all have decent, nice and accessible websites. If I want to find pictures of, say, an old Supra, I go on the Toyota website and I go to the archive section, and they've got nice, clearly laid out photographs and descriptions and original brochures for basically everything. Okay, some of them I have to get translated from Japanese, but they're there. When doing the RX8, they've got the original press photographs from the RX8, both from 2003 when it was launched and from 2008 when it was facelifted. If I go on the Ford website, I can't get a picture of the new Capri, and I believe that's because even Ford themselves are so embarrassed about it, they don't want to make the hyperlinks work. Honestly, American websites, it's not just Ford, General Motors are just as bad, because they divide everything up by model year. And you go on their website and you're like, I need a photo of a Challenger. And they go, what model year? You're like, I don't know. It's a Challenger. It's the one that came out in 2008. Only, you go on 2008. No, that's not actually there. You're like, oh, come on. Yeah, anyway, that's a bit of a rant.
I had that same problem with the BMW website the other day.
Oh, BMW Press Club website is hideous. I have now found a way of making it work, but you have to know what you're looking for in advance. You can't just go searching and hope you encounter stuff, because it will never ever happen. Do you know what I resorted to? I resorted to using the site prefix on Google.
Oh, yeah.
Where you do site : then put the website name in, then space, then the thing you're actually searching for.
Yeah. I do not blame you. I'll reveal to you over lunchtime the secrets of decoding the BMW website.
So that means so the cars that you have had are your Toyota ST205.
Yep.
Your S2000.
Yep.
And what was the other one? Oh, the Previa.
Yeah.
3.
Yeah, I think so.
Does that mean I've out-Japanese card you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, I've won something in my life.
Because I've had 9 BMWs.
No BMWs. Very proud.
I think that might be it. I just, for whatever reason, just never wound up buying Japanese cars. And I think part of it is because, like most young people, having watched and absorbed much motoring media, I was prejudiced against certain things, including front-wheel drive. And, of course, a great number of Japanese performance cars are front-wheel drive. So stuff like the Civics, the Integras, the Accords, things like that, I was just totally ignorant of, because, well, I want rear-wheel drive because I've been told rear-wheel drive is better, so I'll buy a BMW.
Well, you know what they used to call front-wheel drive? Wrong-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Which is actually not true. There are so many good front-wheel drive cars out there.
Well, also, the Japanese generally had an understanding that there is a limit to how much power you can put through a front-wheel drive car, which some other manufacturers kind of completely ignored. I mean, it used to be said that basically 200 horsepower is pretty much your limit. Suspension technology and things did get better, and now you can definitely put more than that through the front wheel of a car. But if you get, say, a new Civic, which is 320 brake, give or take, if it's dry, it'll be okay. If you spit on the floor, no, it's a bit of a problem. But, right, let's throw some cars out there. NSX.
Yeah. I like that.
I have a thing for the original NSX
Yes.
with the pop-up lights. I can't remember what the name of the...
NA1.
NA1, that's it. There we go. Wasn't as big a fan of the second one with the non-pop-up headlights. I don't know, something about the front just didn't look right. But the new NSX, I am really curious about, because it just seems like... I mean, you've spoken very highly of it, and everywhere I've sort of turned, people have said really, really good things about it. And especially the price, like that is one of the cars that's gone in the opposite direction. It's kind of...
I know this might sound controversial, I would not sell my Ferraris for a GTR R34. I would consider selling one for a new NSX, because I have a belief in the States the prices have already gone up, and I have a belief that that's going to be one of those cars here that in 10 years we look at and go, do you know what, that was actually a brilliant car we just didn't buy.
And because we didn't buy them, there aren't that many of them. And then as demand goes up and supply is constrained.
And that leads me to a question that I have for the both of you, actually. Do you worry about your cars getting so valuable that you'd have to get rid of them? Any of your particular fleet members?
No.
No. Oh, I don't know. Not my 370, because I've modified it to within an inch of its life, and it's even getting more modified as we speak. And I don't think. I think although it's a well-known 370Z, you know, get a lot of views in America and comments from people all around the world saying, you know, how my Z has a good reputation. And for that reason, it probably wouldn't lose as much money on it as others. But I don't think it's likely to go up that much. But I do think the second gen Nismo will be one of those cars that later people will really appreciate, because its design has really stood the test of time. The earlier versions of the 370Z, not so much. But once they found that design in the 2015 Plus edition, the V2 Nismo, I think if they changed the headlights and the taillights on it, it would just look like a current car.
That is a really good looking car.
So I think it's one of those cars that people will realise how good it was. And also it actually was quite groundbreaking in a few ways. Like, it was the first car on the road, if I'm not mistaken, that did the auto
blip. Yeah.
auto blip on a manual. Which I think Porsche then copied some years later, and everyone made a big deal out of it. It's a bit like when Apple does something that Android has been doing for years.
Fun fact: the Minis have that as well. The F56 Minis, they do auto blip, because my wife's old Mini One, you know, you put it down and you go down to change down the gear and it blip up and rib match.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think they were first to market with it.
Yeah. So I think it will be a car that will go up later, but I think by the time it gets to that stage, I'll probably be too old to drive anyway, so I won't mind.
I mean, yeah, basically, both of my Japanese cars, they have gone up in value somewhat. The S2000 may actually have doubled in value since I bought it, particularly because of the colour, which is very rare. But I've also spent about 5 times what I paid on it in doing stuff
That's
to
what I was
it.
going to say.
So, and the Celica is in much the same sort of boat. It's not gone up by that much. It's probably gone up by a bit, but I've also spent a fortune on it. Yeah, I lay awake at night dreaming of having to lay awake at night with that being a concern, that my cars are now worth so much money I daren't drive them. To be honest, the thing is, broadly speaking, the cost of fixing them is the same. Like, if you scratch the side of a £1,000 car, you scratch the side of a £100,000 car, broadly speaking, it'll cost you the same to sort it. So you have to try and not worry about that too much. I think a lot of people get really wrapped up in the whole, oh my God, what happens? What if? You go, well, sell the car then. You know, if you spend your entire life, which many Ferrari owners do, thinking of 1,000 reasons to not drive the car, well, why do you have it? You know, because you only have it because you saw one driving about, or you heard about how great they were to drive, or how good they sound when they're at full chat. You know, like, let the beast out.
One of the reasons I enjoy owning older, less valuable cars, so I just don't have to worry as much. It's great.
Well, yeah, but you say that, and, you know, I remember my 350Z had the sunset orange, which is that kind of bronzy launch colour for the version 1, the DEs. Somebody decided that, well, that's a bit too nice of a car to be outside your house, so they came along and they keyed it. And this was in 2006, and in 2006, having that repaired costs nearly £2,000.
Wow.
Because of it's a 3-layer pearlescent finish on the paint. And now, oh gosh, I don't even know what that would cost, but if you want to paint the side of a 3-layer pearl car, like one whole side of it, which is what you'll end up having to do because it's so hard to match the paint and have it blended into the other panels, I'm pretty sure you're looking at more like around like £5,000-6,000.
Yeah, and stuff like that can write those cars off now.
Yeah,
very, very easily.
yeah.
So, one random car, okay, because we've not discussed Lexus at all. Okay.
I forgot about Lexus.
Right, yeah. Which is another one of these weird brands that I think a lot of the reason that us petrolheads don't tend to think about it is because they're generally obsessed with hybrids and CVT gearboxes, or e-CVTs as they want to call it. People tell me off, they go, well, it's not really a CVT, is it? I'm like, no, but they do call it an e-CVT and it drives like a CVT, so That's a technical term. So, yeah, I got a little while back a car from Lexus, and it really took me by surprise. And it told me something about the way the Japanese do things, which I think us here in Britain are not appreciative of enough. And I'll set the scene for you. My mother's husband was terminally ill, and he's a big football fan. Those two things were unrelated. And on his bucket list was going to every one of the, I believe, 92 football grounds that form the British Professional Footballing League, or whatever it's properly called. He'd been to the vast majority of them and was basically sort of working his way through the ones that he hadn't done. A couple he had to go back to the club because they'd moved ground or whatever. Anyway, he got to his last ground to go to, which was Manchester City. So I think the Etihad Stadium, I want to call it. Could be completely wrong there. Anyway, he said to me, look, because at this point, the team he supported, which was Ipswich, weren't in the Premier League at the time. Unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to see them get promoted twice, the buggers. The team he supported wasn't playing there, and no team that he knew was playing there. So basically, he had to get there. He couldn't get a team bus or anything to get there anyway. And his sight wasn't great, and he wasn't particularly mobile by this point. Anyhow, he said, James, could you drive me to the stadium, and could you maybe find something comfortable to take me into? Yes, of course I can. Now, I didn't really own anything that fit the bill at this point in time, but I thought, that's okay. I can definitely get a car for this. And I thought, I would really love for this to be a nice British success story. So I was talking to Bentley at the time, asked if they had anything available, and they said, we're really, really sorry, we just don't. The press fleet's fairly small. And I knew that they didn't because I'd been talking to them trying to arrange a car. So I emailed Rolls-Royce. They blanked me. I emailed Jaguar Land Rover. They blanked me. Didn't respond. Okay, all right. So I thought, that's not going to happen. Who else do I know that makes nice, comfy, that's the priority, luxury cars? Lexus. So I emailed Lexus, said, guys, I need something big with plenty of space in the back, easy to get in and out of for somebody with limited mobility with a walking stick, and that's going to be comfy to do a fairly long drive in. I said, tell you what, we've got an RX. And at that point in time, the RX as a model was nearly 7 years old. It was about to be replaced. In fact, between me driving it and my video coming out, the car got replaced. So I said, look, tell you what, here's the car. As long as you do your normal review video or whatever with it, so we can tick our box, you can do whatever you like with it. Thank you so much, guys. So I got this car. So the car arrived, I looked at it, and it's a very nice looking thing, CVT engine with a V6 and whatnot, and gearbox that nobody likes. And I got in it, I looked at it, and I thought, blooming heck, it's got, you could get the car, confusingly, with either a sunroof or no sunroof, but the no sunroof actually is a sunroof. What it means is you could either have it with a panoramic roof, is what they call the sunroof option, or if you don't have that, you have your small classic 90s style sunroof above the driver and passenger, and that gives you more headroom in the back if you have it like that. I looked at it, I thought, hang on a minute, the visor for it is manual. It's a 70-odd grand luxury car, and I've got to do my own blooming visor. It's not a windy thing. It's still electric for the glass, but if you just want the cover off, you got to do that yourself. So I went to go and slide it back, put it back, and went, oh, hang on a minute. Covered it up, opened it up again, closed it again, opened it again. I thought, my God, the damping in this thing is so exquisitely beautiful. It was like moving silk through warm butter. It was just, you're like, someone has sat here for months on end making sure that that movement is the slickest, the nicest it could possibly be. I then noticed it had in the sun visor a fuel card holder slot, if you put your credit card or whatever. So I don't know why, don't know what possessed me, but for this particular, I never use them. For this particular car, I thought, I'm going to put my fuel card in there. I put my fuel card in there. There's a little piece of rubber in it. So it just grabs your card nicely and neatly, and it won't move and it won't go anywhere. And then when you go and get out, there's just the correct amount of resistance. So it'll come out easily, but it also won't fall out. And you're like, you then realise every single piece of this car, it didn't look as flashy or as showy as the German equivalent, like a big Mercedes or a 7 Series or something like that.
Or a Rolls Royce.
Or a Rolls Royce. But everything that you touched had the sense of a depth of engineering, like the tactility, the feel of everything was just beautifully put together. Like you got the sense that in 20 years, this car is still going to work just like it does now. And that is something that I think no one else can get right.
I think I got that vibe from the LC500 as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. The interior of the LC500. I mean, I spent some time recently up in Scotland in the Ferrari Roma Spider, and look, it's a lovely, lovely car. But the one I was driving was over 300,000 quid. The LC500 is a third of the price, and I think the interior, in terms of quality and tactility, is better. Like you sit in an LC500 and you sit in it and look at it and go, "Oh my word, this is just gorgeous."
That was always the thing that most Japanese brands competed on, that the equipment levels and the quality that you would get from those cars would be equivalent to other European cars that were much, much more expensive. I think Japanese cars were usually the first ones to have things like aircon as standard and, electric windows as standard.
Yeah.
Like these were not extra cost options.
I'll tell you the car I used to be obsessed with. I actually, even though, I like my weird cars and things like that, I'm a big Luxo barge person. I love a luxury kind of saloon car. It really does it for me. And I used to want an LS400, the first generation one. And I just look at those and I just think for the time, they must have been the absolute pinnacle of luxury. And do you remember that they did a suspension thing with Bose and it never went to market, and it was like essentially the car could go over all these things and it would lay completely level and flat over the road. I think they did a Road and Track or whoever it was, the magazine that did the thing, Auto
Bose
Week
or Bosch?
Bose, yeah. The game company that makes all the audio stuff were doing suspension. It was really weird, and I just thought, wow, why didn't that go into production? Because I'm sure there's some reason.
Very expensive. And if it goes wrong in quite a spectacular way. We're only now just starting to see active suspension on passenger cars. The Ferrari Puro Sangue has it. The new F80 has it, which actually is by far the most interesting bit of the F80, and nobody's talking about it.
That Chinese brand, I can't remember who they were.
I think I've got it.
Yep.
There's a few different Chinese cars have now got it as well. Yeah, the problem with it is when it works, it does incredible things. But I think in the Ferrari, it's capable of putting something like, 700 pounds-feet of force through the suspension or something daft like that. It's a lot of force. It's torque, isn't it? Anyway, the thing can push back effectively. Problem is, if that goes wrong, it can go wrong in ways that your old suspension never used to be able to, because it can now basically flip you off the road if it wants.
Wow.
Well, that's one of the things that I can't remember the name of the car now. The supercar from China that jumps.
Is it the EP9 or something like that?
I don't remember.
I saw one at Goodwood, and it was basically just jumping, and it was also basically turning it around on itself. It wasn't moving; it was just rotating on the spot because it can turn all four wheels independently,
Like a factory lowrider.
Yeah. They can do just nuts things.
Wow.
Very, very cool. Also, gentlemen, LFA.
Oh, come on. That's like
European companies should consider themselves very, very fortunate that the Japanese don't often tend to do even sort of high-end sports cars, and they almost never do supercars, because if they did, or they'd put the Italians out of business pretty quickly. When they do something like that, and again, the LFA is one of those cars where, do you remember when it came out, everyone was a bit disappointed because it took so long to get to market, because they had to change it halfway through. It was supposed to be aluminium. Then they decided it wasn't going to be. It was going to be carbon fiber. So they basically had to start again. They did the same thing with the NSX. It took so long to get to market because they were so determined to get it right. I think by the time it did land, the specs were a little bit behind. Things weren't quite so great as they should be. And yes, I know, by the way, the second generation NSX is sort of a product of Honda of USA or Acura. but the LFA is definitely not. When the car came out, the numbers and everything weren't the best and all that, but I mean, I've never driven one, and I may never get the chance to drive one again because they're also worth silly money now. But they look like a car where you're like, yeah, I bet that is one of those things where you're like, the numbers don't mean anything. I mean, just look at it, listen to it. Like, I've sat in one, and it's just incredible.
It's one of the best sounding V10s of all time, I'd say.
Yeah.
I heard a rumor that the Lexus name was arrived at by because it means luxury export to the US or something ridiculous like that.
I see that a lot.
It's a meme, but I don't know if it's true.
And I've asked a few people, including people that should know, and basically the answer is we don't know. It might be true, but it does seem a bit on the nose, really. Because the Lexus brand didn't exist in Japan until the LFA arrived, because they just had Toyotas. So the Toyota equivalents to Lexus, so the Crown instead of the GS and stuff like that. And the Crown is quite cool. Also, K cars.
Oh, we've not talked about K cars. Some of the most amazing cars. And you were talking earlier about kind of like creativity born with restriction. You know, those 660cc engines.
Yep.
But I don't think there was a limit on the power, was there?
Yes, there was.
Oh, there was.
There was. I think it was about 70 horsepower, or give or take. But of course, that didn't stop them from making the car capable of making more power.
Yes.
It's a bit like the 276 horsepower agreement that they had that was, questionably adhered to, but in terms of the actual delivered car, but certainly not in terms of the power capabilities of the engines they supplied.
Yeah.
I haven't been out in a K car yet. I'm hoping to do that at some point. I think it would just be quite a funny sight because I am 6'4" and I struggled to get in my MX-5. In fact, I had to do a very common thing in the MX-5 world, which is known as a foamectomy, where you remove bits of the foam from the seat, and then you would remove the footrest inside the car, and you would change the door handle, the door pulls inside out to like kind of string things. Basically, that's the only way I could fit in that car.
Some K cars, you'll be absolutely fine. AutoZam, I don't think it's going to happen for you.
No. I've seen those. They look great, but I think I'd wear it like a shoe.
Yeah. Pretty much. They're awesome cars. Again, the minivans that they have, because that's their ultimate luxury, is you get these nice, lovely things with big airline-style seats in the back, loads of space, loads of room. Whereas here in Europe, and again in the States, I think this notion of luxury is one that's also become associated with power. And I think there are so many cars out there now which are ruined by the quest for speed and power. The Bentleys that I've driven of late, I'm just not in love with them as much because they're very, very cool things. They're very, very nice to look at. But inside, they're spectacular, if a little impersonal. They're a little bit cold. But to drive, they're also way, 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 way too firm, which I know Ant likes. But in a Bentley, the priority should be comfort.
I agree. And I think this is one of the few times that I might actually agree with you on this. Because what was it, a Flying Spur?
Flying Spur, yeah.
And that lovely green as well. I really liked that. I really liked it a lot. And I chauffeured James around for a bit in that, for a bit of a video, just for a laugh. But I did comment, like, I don't know if it was at the same time or back to back. You had a e-tron RS GT.
Yeah, it was back to back, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that suspension should have been on the Bentley, and the Bentley suspension should have been on that.
Yeah, because you buy a 4-door Bentley, you expect a comfortable ride, right? It wasn't. It was very, very firm. I mean, probably similar to your Golf, maybe a bit worse. And it's because they've given it 600 odd horsepower and they wanted to be able to go around a corner without basically falling over. Whereas in Japan, when they built the Century, they gave it a V12 because the V12 is smoother. It only had, again, 280 horsepower in line with everything else. And it's a wallowy old thing, which means it's comfortable. You know, I get in modern day luxury cars, Rolls Royces and things, and I go, yeah, it's not actually as comfortable as the old Rover 216 that I drove a while back because the Rover's just soft. You know, and yeah, at the end of the day, you can make the cars comfortable, just making them soft. Yeah, the penalty is that it's going to roll a bit in the corners and things. You're like, yeah, So get your chauffeur to not drive it like it's stolen.
Which one was was it essentially these like the big V12 one that all the government used and people
Yeah, it's a very, very, very high end car. The V12 one specifically, I think, was made from about 97 to I think 2017. The thing with the Century is there's only been, I believe, 3 of them, and they all look fairly similar. Although there is now a new Century that's a 4x4, which is a great shame. But yeah, they still do the saloon. And again, the saloon is there because that is the best configuration for a luxury car.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
What about Infinity? As we were talking about luxury, that was the Nissan equivalent. They pulled out of Europe a few years ago now. Yeah.
A great missed opportunity. They should have just looked at Lexus and gone, well, Toyota can't make it work, so I don't know why we think we can. I think they made the mistake of not basically pushing the marketing hard enough, because you ask most people what an Infinity is and they just don't even know. And the biggest problem is I think they did make a mistake of you get in an Infinity and you recognize lots of Nissan switchgear. So I think if you had already been a Nissan customer and you went to get in an Infinity, you'd be like, hang on a minute, these are the switches out of my Qashqai, only you want even more money. And it was another brand that just wasn't utilised. We got to interview Andy Palmer a while back, and he said that one of his regrets was that he couldn't convince the board to really push Infinity and to really utilise what it was definitely capable of, because they also chucked out some brilliant cars. I've driven a few of them in my time, and they are awesome. Now, they actually make a great second-hand buy because nobody knows what it is, so you can get a hell of a lot for not a lot, and that makes them rather appealing.
And if you find a really good Nissan specialist and independent, you can get it looked after quite well as well.
Yeah, it won't cost you lots of money at all.
They're basically Nissans. Like, what was the I can't remember what it was called now. In America, I think it was the Infinity G50, which was which was the Skyline.
Yes, the G37 or something, isn't it? Or, well,
yeah, the G35 and the G37,
Yeah.
and they were basically just the 350Z engine and the 370Z engine.
Yeah.
So mechanically, largely the same, just a different body.
I think a lot of people took those drifting as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And they also did the FX, the big 4x4 with a 5-litre V8 in it.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a cool car. And again, not silly money at all. I remember speaking to someone a while back, and he said that he had a couple of cars he bought at the time. He bought, I think it might have been a Renault of some description or a Peugeot, and he also bought the Honda equivalent, which I think might have been the Jazz, which is obviously a desperately, desperately unsexy car. But he had them both for like 10 years, and after 10 years, the French one was just disintegrating, whereas the Honda was just keeping going. He's like, but the Honda didn't sell very well because it was 400 quid more. He's like, yeah, but 400 quid bought you a car that had been engineered from top to bottom to just last. And unfortunately, consumers here in Britain, we don't appreciate that. And that's probably also part of the finance thing. I mean, I have a personal belief. I might try and make this into a video at some point. How I can do it without it coming across terribly badly, I don't know. But I have a theory that one of the big problems we've got with cars is that they've become too cheap. Car companies got to a point, and I think this was led by a lot of American companies, where they made their profits through volume. Chuck them out and get the margins low, and then convince people, more importantly, that they have to replace their car in a few years. And finance is the way that they do this, because you don't want people owning the cars anymore. You want them on this continuous cycle of finance so that every 2 to 4 years they have to get another car, because they don't want to then fork out 10 grand or whatever it is, maybe a lot more, to settle the finance and actually own the vehicle. This means that there are lots and lots and lots of cars out there being made in such a way that they'll only make sense financially to the manufacturer if they can stack them high and sell them cheap. This means cars don't last. So I would prefer to see us go back to a sort of time where, yeah, cars are expensive because they should be better built. I would like to see manufacturers penalised if it's found that after 10 years, X percentage of their vehicles have started failing MOTs or are falling apart or are not working. Because first off, you'd need a complete total shift in society, which is just not going to happen. It's not realistic. People should not be stigmatized for the fact that they can't afford a new car, because people have now got themselves in a situation where they would rather buy, and I've had this conversation, I think all of us here, I think every petrol head listening has probably had this conversation with somebody where they're trying to convince someone to buy maybe a 4 or 5 year old car from a premium, good quality, maybe Japanese brand like your Lexus or whatever, that is going to do the job and it's going to last. And instead, people want to go and buy a brand spanking new something, right? Because it's cheap on finance. When if you actually look at it, over the next few years, the new thing is going to cost lots more money than buying an old car, but people are obsessed with having something that is new. I have always been of the opinion that I'd rather buy last year's good thing than this year's okay thing. Like I've basically always had that with my hi-fi kit, has almost always been like about 3 or 5 years old, but it was really, really good 3 or 5 years ago. Because, okay, computers are maybe kind of the exception to this, but you'll obviously know, well, great quality stereo stuff is always great quality.
Yeah.
Like, things will improve, things will get better, changes, of course, will be made. But, you go and pick up a guitar from the 70s that was a damn good guitar, it's still a damn good guitar, right? But, technology and stuff like that does date and age and so on. We talked about this recently. Now, actually, in a lot of cars, we actually have a way of updating the tech. So this is no longer the concern it was. But people are obsessed with having something new. And I just think that's so detrimental. I am a believer that the whole... EV versus combustion, this, that, and the other. That whole argument is just a complete and total dead end to me, because the actual problem is cars being treated as effectively disposable technology. Like, why are we not encouraging people to get cars lasting longer? Why are we not making sure that people, use cars over a longer period of time and keep them roadworthy? It's simply because manufacturers have no interest in that. There's no money for them.
This has been my ethos with my 23-year-old Golf and my now 35-year-old Maestro, is that I could have, and I have, as I said, we've spoken about it before, I did briefly have a brand new Dacia Sandero, but it really wasn't the one for me, and that's why I ended up going back to older cars, and that's why I've spent a considerable amount on my Golf, is because, hey, now my Golf's really well sorted and would probably do another near 200,000 miles as long as you maintain it and it doesn't rust away.
That is ironic, though, isn't it? Because actually that is the one problem that Japanese cars across the board do tend to have, is now apparently they do use salt on the roads in Japan. Apparently this is actually a thing, because a lot of people say they don't, but maybe it depends on the prefecture. I'm not sure, but apparently it's not unheard of. Also, it's an island. Everyone basically lives next to the coast, so there's salt in the air whether you like it or not. But I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, their MOT equivalent over there, the Shaken, if you fail that, your car's condemned. It's not going back. You don't get a rechance. You don't get a retry. That's it. That's why they export so many cars, because they're trying to keep the car industry going. Of course, we then get their hand-me-downs, which is lovely. And that's how so many cool cars come over. One day, I would love to go over there and buy a car at auction and have it shipped back, and preferably something really weird and bizarre that nobody else would get.
K-Truck. You need to have a K-Truck over here.
Oh yeah, the other half wants a K-Truck.
Yeah,
I know.
Done.
I know.
And that's a interesting point to probably think about. What would be your personal favorite Japanese car that you would want to have? Money, no objects.
Yeah.
What would it be? And then I think we probably ought to wrap up after that.
Email us on landlord@theradiatorarms.com. And we want to thank all of you for listening in to today's very special episode. We hope that you have enjoyed it. As ever, I have been James. We've got to my right, Will.
Goodbye.
To my left, Ant.
Yo.
And we'll see you for the next one. Don't forget, we're here on YouTube first, and then a week later on Amazon, Apple, and Spotify. And we launch at 7 o'clock on a Monday morning in time for your commute. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.